Nourishing Traditional Diets, the Key to Vibrant Health. And we are going to talk about what really is a healthy diet today. How many of you are confused about how you should eat? Yeah, everybody's confused, and everyone's deliberately confused. So there's just so much bad advice out there, and people are suffering because they don't know how to eat. I am not giving medical advice. This is for educational purposes only. So what is a healthy diet? We have all kinds of diets out there. We have the Atkins, carnivore, keto type diets that rely heavily on meat. Then we have on the other extreme the vegetarian or vegan diets, about which many fantastic claims are made. And then we have what I call dietary schemes. Zone, all raw, macrobiotic, South Beach. Remember the South Beach diet? Came and went. Juicing, food combining, blood type, metabolic typing. I call these schemes because they were all made up by men. They were all made up by men who never had to put a meal on the table for a hungry family day after day after day. And unless you've been in the trenches and are able to prepare food that your children will actually eat, I really don't think you should be writing about healthy diets, because honey, I don't care what your blood type is, you're going to eat what I've prepared for you. So, okay. So even Lisa, who's very smart, even Lisa is confused about what constitutes a healthy diet. Then we have the official government diet, which came out in 1984. It was in the form of a pyramid. Now they've since abandoned this pyramid, but even the new My Plate diet is based heavily on carbohydrates, with some fruits and vegetables put in there, a little bit of animal food and hardly any fats, and very little salt. And this was supposed to help the obesity problem. And yet obesity has increased to 30% since they put this diet out there. So it's not working. And this diet is not based on science. It was formulated to promote the products of commodity agriculture. And the USDA, that's their mandate, to sell grains, to sell commodities. And that's what this diet is designed to do. And what it did, although they give lip service to whole grains, it gave Americans the green light to eat all the carbohydrates that they wanted to. And of course, this is how it ends up. This is the real food pyramid. So to answer the question, what is a healthy diet, we need to go back to the work of Weston A. Price, who wrote this wonderful book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. And he was asking himself the same question: what is a healthy diet? Now, Weston Price was a dentist. He had a very busy practice in Cleveland, Ohio. And he was very perplexed because all he saw in his practice was problems in the teeth, decay, infection, and what he called dental deformities. That means crowded and crooked teeth. And he didn't think that any of this was normal. And at this time, the world was opening up, and reports were coming back from isolated populations all over the globe, from anthropologists and explorers. And one of the first comments they always made was, these people have such beautiful teeth. They commented on the teeth and the ease of childbirth. Well, this intrigued Dr. Price very much, because he was not seeing beautiful teeth in his practice. He was seeing all sorts of pathologies of the teeth. So he decided to see for himself, and he embarked on a series of investigations that took him all over the world over a 10-year period. And he wanted to answer two questions. The first question was it true? Was it true that there were people with perfect dental health, and by inference, perfect overall health? Because it was axiomatic in those days, if you had good teeth, you were healthy. That's how they chose recruits for the Army and the services. They looked at their teeth. If they had good teeth, they knew that they were going to be strong and sturdy. So was it true? Could he find healthy people in these isolated populations having healthy teeth and then healthy overall? And the second question he wanted to answer was, if he could find these people, what were they eating? What kind of diets supported excellent dental health, excellent overall health? He wasn't interested in what unhealthy people were eating. In fact, he said, I have no controls in this country. Everybody's sick. So he wanted to know what the diets were of healthy people. So we'll just look at a few places that Dr. Price went. He did these experiments or these studies at the most opportune time when diets were changing. He could still find isolated healthy people. He could compare them to the same people who had changed their diet for modern foods. Sorry about the farm equipment. And he also had a new invention, the camera, which allowed him to take these incredible, unforgettable photographs. So the first place that Dr. Price went was the Nourishing Valley in Switzerland. This was a very isolated valley. The only access was a footpath too narrow for a wheeled cart, so you had to walk in. And he could be assured that the only foods that they were eating was the foods that they grew and prepared right there in their village, with one exception, and that was salt. They did bring salt in. And there were other parts of Switzerland that produced salt. Now, what he did when he came to a tribe or village, he sat down with the elders, or in the case of Switzerland, it was people from the Department of Health who could interpret for him. And he sat down with the elders. In this case, it was the elders in the church, and explained what his research was about, and then got their permission. And then he lined up everybody in the village and meticulously counted cavities. He wrote these up in reports that were published in peer-reviewed journals and left an amazing record of just how frequent cavities were among traditional people. Well, here we are. Oh, and then the second thing he did was take notes on their overall health. He then described the foods that they ate, and he took samples of the food back to his laboratory in Cleveland and analyzed them for vitamins and minerals. So this is how he worked in all of these populations that he visited. That's a wonderful photograph of the Nourishing Valley today. Very, very narrow, very isolated. In fact, you can only get up here with a car in the summer. The roads are closed in the winter. Well, you can imagine the amazement of the dentist from Cleveland, Ohio. He starts looking in the mouths of all the children and then the adults. And he had to look in 3 mouths before he found even one tooth that had evidence of decay. So less than 1% tooth decay in the Swiss village. They didn't have any dentists. So this was just natural protection against tooth decay. But the other thing that really surprised him was that everybody had naturally straight teeth. There were no dental deformities. They had very broad faces, especially in what he called the middle third of the face between the eyes and the mouth. High cheekbones, which we consider the mark of attractiveness. So everyone had naturally straight teeth. They were very sturdy and strong and tall. The tall people, you can see the children on the right. Face is a little bit small, but you can see they're very round. Everyone has broad, round faces. Where was I? So the next question, the other thing was in talking to health people from the health department, there had never been a case of tuberculosis in this village. And this is a time when tuberculosis was the main health problem of Switzerland, and in fact the whole world. Tuberculosis was a great scourge, but these people seem to be completely immune from tuberculosis. So the next question is, so what were these people eating? And the main food in their diet was dairy. They had goats and cows, and so they had raw milk, raw cheese, raw butter, raw cream. The athletes, during their performances, they had contests throughout Switzerland. They drank bowls of pure cream. That was considered very good food for athletes. The other food they had was dense sourdough rye bread. They could grow rye in the summer months, and they took a long time to make this sourdough rye bread. So the 2 main foods were dairy foods and grains. And this brings me to the so-called paleo diet. The paleo diet, the premise of the paleo diet is that to be healthy, we just avoid these two foods that are new to the human species, dairy foods and grains. But here was a superbly healthy population living on dairy foods and grains. So I don't think much of this paleo diet idea. But of course, the dairy foods were very different from the dairy foods that we have in the supermarkets today, and the grains were prepared with great care, and they weren't sprayed, and they were old-fashioned grains. We'll come back to this whole subject of grains. They did eat meat. They usually killed a calf or a goat once a week, and they ate the whole animal. They ate the blood. They put the blood into rye pancakes. They made blood sausage. They ate the organ meats. They cooked the bones. And this is one real fundamental difference between traditional cultures and our own, is they ate the whole animal, including the organ meats. Now, Dr. Price's work took place at just the right time, because he could compare traditional and modernized people, and he went to villages where there were roads that were bringing in the foods of commerce, as he called them, displacing foods of modern commerce. And there he found a very different situation. He found 1 tooth in 3 was decayed, and the children who were born to the parents who had changed their diets, they had more narrow faces, and they had crowded and crooked teeth. So in just one generation, the dental deformities appeared. This is not a genetic thing. This is a nutritional problem. I'm just going to go back a minute and talk about one other thing that he found in every single culture that he visited, and that was what we call sacred foods. And the sacred foods were considered very important for men and women before conception. Usually they ate these foods for 6 months before conception. Then for women when they were pregnant and breastfeeding, and for children when they were growing. They recognized that when a child is being formed and growing, that's when you need the maximum nutrition. And once you get to adulthood, you can improve your health with your diet, but you cannot change your form. Your house has already been built, okay? Your temple is already built. So the maximum nutrition is really important for conception, preconception, and growth. And this is a big emphasis of the Weston A. Price Foundation. And these practices, which he found all over the world, put modern man to shame, because we don't teach this. This is what we should be teaching our children in schools. This is what every teenage girl should be hearing. To have a healthy baby, that depends on how you eat now. And most of our teenage girls, I think it's really cool to be vegetarians, and they eat a lot of sugar, and this is not a disaster in the making. This is a disaster that's already here. Well, what was the sacred food in the Swiss village? It was a special type of butter that came from the cows when they first went to pasture in the spring. This butter was on very deep yellow, almost an orange color. And so sacred did they consider this butter that they lit a wick and a bowl of butter on the altar in their church to honor the life-giving force in this butter. And I look forward to the day when all of our churches and synagogues and temples and whatever do the same thing, so that we understand that it's our responsibility. God gave us the blueprint. It's a perfect blueprint. But it's our responsibility to build the house according to the blueprint. And our children, our babies and children, are depending on us to have this knowledge. The other thing that happened when the modern foods came in, and these are foods based on sugar, white flour, they were selling their milk to the chocolate factory. Dr. Price rightly called chocolate the displacing food of modern commerce. And the other thing that was coming in was vegetable oils. These are completely new to the human diet, and they were replacing the good fats that they had always consumed. And so the other thing that became very common was tuberculosis, just a scourge of the modern world, and still is. So we're going to switch to the Outer Hebrides now. This is a Gaelic population. The only two European populations that were still around that he could study were the Swiss and the Outer Hebrides, very isolated populations. These people lived on this windswept island. The island, they had no animals on the island, so they had no meat, no milk, no chickens, no eggs. They didn't have trees on the island, so no fruit, no nuts. They couldn't grow vegetables on this island. They didn't have any broccoli or kale. How could they possibly be healthy? So what were these people eating? Because he found virtually no tooth decay, no tuberculosis, and he described a very coherent, friendly society. No one had to lock their doors. There was no thievery or any kind of violence on this island. So what were these people eating? Well, the number one source of calories was seafood, of course. Seafood of all types, including shellfish, and not just the skinless fillets of the fish. They ate the heads, they ate the livers, they steamed the livers to get the oil out of the livers. That was considered very important. And they also were able to grow oats on this island, and so they had porridge and oat cakes prepared very carefully. The sacred food, the food that children got every morning for breakfast so they could grow up healthy and strong, was cod's head stuffed with oats and chopped cod's liver. So eat your breakfast there. I think there's more palatable ways to do this. In Alaska, Dr. Price was able to go into the hinterland and study the people who were still eating their native foods. Here he found virtually no cavities and beautiful wide faces and naturally straight teeth. The woman on the left, he described her teeth as literally 2 rows of pearls. Very sturdy and strong, no tuberculosis. He talked to a doctor who had been there for 30 years among the Eskimos, and he said he had never seen a case of heart disease, cancer, or any condition requiring an operation among those natives who were eating their traditional foods. Also, the women gave birth very easily without any pain. Typically, a woman gave birth at night while her husband was asleep, and when he woke up in the morning, she introduced him to the new baby. The children were sturdy and strong. Look at these children, very curious, right? But the interesting thing is that he never, in these cultures, heard a baby cry. And they weren't crying because they were well-nourished. A well-nourished baby doesn't cry. And a baby that's crying all the time is telling you something, that he's hungry. His belly may be full of food, but he's not getting what he needs. Many of the Eskimos had missing teeth and worn down teeth because they chewed on leather to make their clothes, but even these worn down teeth were not decayed. Worn down right to the dentin, but no decay. And this was a stark contrast to what he found in the towns, the trading posts where the white man's food was coming in, the displacing food of modern commerce. The foods got there a long time before the dentists got there. And even today, a lot of these little towns have no dentists. And the tooth decay was a very serious problem because of the pain. And they became prone to suicide. And the only reason given for suicide was the pain of tooth decay. They became prone to tuberculosis, and then in just one generation, the faces became more narrow. There were dental deformities, overbites, underbites. And that's a nutritional problem. You are not providing the body with the nutrients it needs to build according to the blueprint. And the blueprint of every person on this planet, we're all children of God, we all have the same blueprint, and that is to have a wide, attractive face and naturally straight teeth. That is the blueprint. A major component of the Alaskan diet was seal oil, which they're carrying in this leather bag here. The seal oil was used as a major source of calories, used for cooking, used for dipping. They had this Eskimo ice cream, which was made by whipping the seal oil until it became frothy, and then they would add a few berries, and that was the Eskimo ice cream. Today they make the Eskimo ice cream out of whipping Crisco. Yeah. Naturally, they ate a lot of fish, and the fish were either cooked, sometimes they were eaten frozen. If they were out hunting, they would eat frozen fish. And the fish were also fermented. They were thrown into a hole and allowed to get kind of rotten and the consistency of ice cream, and that was considered a real delicacy, the fermented fish. The Eskimos were very observant, and they noticed that their dogs, if the dogs got fresh fish, they could not pull their sleds all day long. But if they got fermented fish, they had more stamina and they could pull the sleds all day long. So we will be talking about fermented foods and how they provide a lot more stamina and strength for us, and why. These are salmon eggs drying in the sun, fish eggs. And when Dr. Price asked them why they went to such trouble to preserve these salmon eggs, they said, we need these fish eggs so we can have healthy babies. And the fish egg is an extremely nourishing food, and this is something that we definitely encourage. I know when my daughter was pregnant, my gift was I sent her caviar every now and then. So very important food, nutrient-dense food, especially for pregnancy and for healthy babies. These beautiful Indians lived in the Seminole Indians lived in the Florida Everglades. He had to sit there for 2 weeks before they gave him permission to photograph them. But you can see what beautiful looking people these are. They have broad faces, naturally straight teeth. What we're seeing here is the full expression of the genetic potential because the building materials are abundant in their diet. Now let's compare our beautiful Indian princess in the upper right with someone from her same tribe. It's the same genetics, same environment, but a different diet. Her parents were eating the white man's processed food, and you can see that the face is much more narrow and the teeth are crooked and crowded. And the teeth are a mirror to the rest of the body. This is the only part of the body where we can see inside, right? But if the teeth are not formed properly, if there's not enough space for them, it's a sign that there will be problems in the rest of the body. Nothing has been formed to the maximum. So we like to say the teeth tell the tale. When the teeth are naturally straight, it means there's going to be plenty of room in the head for the pituitary, the pineal, the hypothalamus. The sinus cavities and the ear tubes will be capacious, so they will be very immune to infection. And I do like to point out that the hypothalamus is the master gland. It directs all the other glands. It's right in the middle of your head in a cavity in the skull. And so if the skull is narrow, there's not going to be as much room for the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus is the seat of impulse control. And when we think of traditional cultures, the Native Americans, for example, we think they were people with great impulse control. They could withstand suffering and privation. They didn't react quickly to things. They had impulse control. When we think of our children today, what are we seeing in our young people today? We're seeing lack of impulse control. This all goes back to the diet, the preconceptual and the pregnancy diet. So if the teeth are straight, we see good skeletal development, good musculature. When the fetus is starting to grow, there's a cell that divides and divides till you get 32, and then that divides and half go to the teeth and half go to make the spinal column. So the spinal column and the teeth are very much related. And if there's plenty of room for the teeth and the teeth are well formed, then the spinal column will also be well formed and strong. Keen eyesight and hearing. Now let me just ask how many in this audience need corrective lenses, glasses or contact lenses? Okay, it's about 70% of us. Now if we were a tribe and had to survive by hunting, and only 38% of us had perfect eyesight, I don't think we would make it. So keen eyesight and hearing, optimal function of all the organs, and then we have the mental nourishment, because our mental outlook, the way we think, our optimism, all that depends on good nutrition. And Dr. Price was always intrigued by how optimistic and happy these people were. They laughed a lot. You know, everyone seemed to get along. And finally, when the face is broad and round, the pelvic opening is round. And that is the perfect shape for the baby to come through. And this was an observation that all of these early explorers and anthropologists made, was how easy childbirth was. Okay, if the teeth are coming crowded and crooked, it means there's going to be compromised space for the master glands in the head. There'll be poor development, poor posture, easily injured. Now they're actually restricting time on the playgrounds because the kids get injured. Just bouncing around out there. That's not normal. Poor eyesight and hearing. Eyesight is one of the first things to go. Compromised function of all the organs, so the pancreas, the heart, the kidneys. There's far less cells in the kidney, far fewer cells in the kidney when the child is poorly nourished. And then you see the mental aspects, the depression, behavior problems, learning problems, and finally, the pelvic opening will not be round, it will be oval. And that is not a good shape for the baby's head to come through. And childbirth becomes very painful and life-threatening. Dr. Price went to the South Seas. He made a point of going to islands that were not, where they did not have trading posts. So he could study people who were still eating their traditional foods. And this is my favorite page in the whole book. Look at the width of the palate in these faces. And this is the blueprint for all of us, okay? And I like to point out that these happy boys are teenagers. Our teenagers don't look like this. They're not happy, They're grumpy, they're depressed, they're addicted, they're worried. These are happy teenage boys. A couple more examples, and the beautiful woman in the upper photograph is 90 years old. We don't know the average lifespan of these people, and certainly many people were carried off by injury and trauma. But Dr. Price found many elderly people in all of these cultures. Many Eskimos bragged of being over 100 years old. We don't know if they were telling the truth. But this certainly wasn't the kind of diet that gave beautiful people that died young, which is what the critics say about our diet. So you can see how gracefully you age when you have that good facial structure to begin with. So, foods of the South Sea Islanders. Now we're in a tropical climate. We have a different type of diet. Naturally, lots of seafood. They have crab, octopus, lots of fish. They have pigs. Pigs were a sacred food brought by Captain Cook. Once the pig arrived, they were immediately recognized as a sacred food. They cooked the pigs in underground ovens, being careful to reserve all the blood and the fat. That was put into vessels made of banana leaves and cooked in these same ovens. They had a starchy food. This was actually a fairly high carbohydrate diet. They had yams or taro. This is on the lower right is the taro root. They've got the pig wrapped in the taro leaves, but the taro root is also fermented, put in a hole and allowed to ferment. And the boy on the left is having a snack, which he did not get from a vending machine. He's eating a delicious fatty sea worm. This is a fabulous photograph that was sent to me by Kay Baxter in New Zealand. This is Tahiti. Can you guess what these are? Well, I told you what they are, right? They are shark stomachs, and they put the liver inside the shark stomach and let the livers ferment, and then they capture the oil that drips out. This is fermented shark liver oil, and this was a sacred food considered very important for having healthy babies. The contrast between these healthy, happy native people eating their traditional foods and those on the modernized diet was just tragic. They suffered from tremendous tooth decay that caused terrible suffering, and then the next generation, the altered facial structure and a narrowed face, and those happy expressions are not there anymore. So this photograph perfectly illustrates the difference between normal facial development on the right and what I would call modern facial development on the left. These young people are obviously very similar genetics from the same tribe, but what you're seeing on the right is very strong facial bones. So the face can be wide, and all those little bones in the face and the skull are broad, okay? On the left, you've got less robust, less strong facial development. Let's just say that you had a blueprint to build a house, and your house was going to have a nice wide front door. And when it came time to build your house, you just bought the cheapest materials, or you couldn't find good materials. And to build a house that would still stand up, you would need to make your door narrow, because if you built a wide door, your house would collapse. So this is an adjustment that your body makes when the building materials are not optimal. It builds more narrow. And that's exactly what we're seeing there. Here are some dental casts taken by Dr. Price. On the right, you have a healthy, primitive adult. On the left, you have a typical American adult, also adult. So you see down below, on the right, what you're seeing is beauty, strength, order. This is the natural blueprint. And on the left, you're seeing weakness, chaos, physical degeneration. And in studies with animals, they find that when you get this kind of change because of poor diet, each generation becomes weaker, and finally, after about 4 generations on this diet, there's no more reproduction. Now, we are on our 3rd and 4th generation of processed food in this country, and what are we seeing? Widespread infertility. And many of the children today will grow up and not have offspring. So we are in the 11th hour here. The situation is very serious, and unless we turn things around ourselves and help others turn things around, there's no future for us. I included some drawings of architectural arches, because an arch made of stone is just very similar to an arch with teeth in it. If the bones are not strong, if the stones are not strong, the arch will fall down. And these are typical dental deformities that dentists are seeing today. They give all kinds of explanation. They say it's genetic. Oh, it's just genetic. Or it's thumb sucking. The latest theory is that this is caused by the fact that we eat soft food today. This is a really... there have been books written about this. There was a book called Jaws, and they said it's because we eat soft food today. Well, this is just a supposition, because you can tell when a child is born if it has good facial structure. And the first foods that babies eat are always soft. They're mother's milk and purees and things. So that's not a very good explanation, in my opinion. No, these are nutritional problems caused by inadequate diet while the mother is pregnant, and then when the child is growing. So the first bone in the body that's affected by poor nutrition is the maxilla. This is the upper jawbone, this purple bone. And every other bone in the head touches in some way on the maxilla. So the maxilla determines whether you'll have a broad face, wide cheekbones, broad middle third of the face. And then the second bone that's affected is the mandible, which is the lower jawbone. And so it comes right out in the facial structure. So I have a few photographs of my own. This beautiful woman was born in the 1920s. She looks like, the old black and white movies, all those beautiful actresses. This was the way people looked in those days. And her diet she did not have to eat cod's head stuffed with chopped cod's liver or anything weird. She grew up on whole raw Jersey milk, pasture-fed Jersey milk, lots of butter and cream. There were not a lot of crackpots in those days telling people not to eat butter and cream. They put butter on everything, and they put cream on the fruit. Lots of shellfish. She lived in the Chesapeake Bay area, and they had fish, crabs, oysters, shrimp. And fish eggs were a very important part of the diet. The shad roe in the spring was, everybody ate the fish eggs. They knew this was healthy for them. They ate meat, and they also ate liver. They ate liver once a week. Why? Because the doctors told them to. Mothers were told to cook liver once a week in order to avoid anemia. That was the only way they knew to avoid anemia, but they were also getting a lot of other good things in the liver. Chicken broth, a wonderful southern dish like we have back in the corner, fruits and vegetables, and one other food that almost every American child before the Second World War was given, and that is cod liver oil. They were given cod liver oil by their doctors. The mothers were told to give cod liver oil. They got cod liver oil in the schools, and even when they went to Sunday school, they got cod liver oil. They were given cod liver oil because they knew it protected them against what we call infectious diseases like measles. This is before antibiotics. But they also understood that cod liver oil helped the children grow strong. So this was a wonderful health campaign that occurred in America up to the Second World War, and then it all went away. How many of you got cod liver oil growing up? Very good, very good. Both my parents had cod liver oil growing up. They both had raw milk growing up. They both had naturally straight teeth and perfect eyesight. And I remember my father used to sit at the table and he said, "I just don't understand it. Your mom and I have perfect teeth and perfect eyesight. How come all you kids need braces and glasses?" Well, we weren't getting cod liver oil. We weren't getting whole milk, or raw milk. We never got liver. My mother was a great cook, but we had whole food, but we didn't get these really nutrient-dense foods. This is a photograph of the sister of Mrs. Bowen on this farm. So a Southern Maryland woman, look at her face. Look how round her face is, okay? This is a beautiful diet here in this part of the world. People drank lots of milk. It was raw milk, of course. Wonderful seafood, butter. I had an old timer tell me that when they sit down to dinner, there was a plate with a big ball of butter on it, like a half a sphere. He said it looked like cheese. It was so orange. And we didn't just take a scraping of butter. We took an inch. We sliced an inch slice of this butter ball and put it on our food. They were eating a lot of pastured butter. Lard and pork, chicken, beef, game, and liver. So this was a wonderful, the Chesapeake diet, you can't do any better. And we need to get back to embracing all of these foods. This is from a Central American village. These children may be poor, we may call them deprived, but they have the most important gift that any child can have, and that is perfect physical development. Broad faces, naturally straight teeth. This might be called a plant-based diet. They have a lot of rice and beans. It's a poverty diet, but they have some very good nutrient-dense foods also, raw goat milk, plenty of seafood, organ meats. When they kill an animal, they eat the whole animal. And insects. I know there's a big controversy about insects these days. I don't want to eat insects, but insects are a very important nutrient-dense part of many diets. By contrast, modern children have narrow faces. Almost all of them need braces to straighten their teeth. They're plagued with allergies, asthma, skin problems, developmental problems, learning disabilities, behavior problems, and very often addictions. But there's good news. There's good news. Here are some of the beautiful babies born to Weston Price parents who had the love and the wisdom for the next generation to change their diet, to eat nutrient-dense foods before conception, to prepare for conception, and during conception, breastfeeding, and the growth of the children. These are our hope for the future. We have so many problems in the world today. I think if we can just concentrate on bringing healthy children into the world with good, clear minds who can think, who have the will to get things done, let's let them solve the problems, okay? But we'll just concentrate on the good nutrition. So by now you may be even more confused than when we started, because I said I was going to tell you what a healthy diet was. But there's obviously a lot of variety in these diets. Some had no plant foods at all. Some had very few animal foods, some of the African diets, for example. Some were high carb, some were low carb, some had mostly cooked food, some had large amounts of raw food, some had dairy and some didn't, some had grains and some didn't, some had fruits and some didn't. So how can we make any sense of this? So what we've done at the Weston A. Price Foundation is we've come up with what we call our 11 principles, 11 characteristics of healthy traditional diets. Principles 1, 2, 3, and the last one, principle 11, were formulated by Dr. Price, and then principles 4 through 10 were formulated by us, with a lot of study of what we find in all traditional diets. So let's go through the principles. Okay. The first principle is there were no refined or denatured foods in the healthy traditional diets. Now, the refined foods of modern commerce that Dr. Price was talking about in the 1930s, it was a rather short list, included sugar, white flour, vegetable oils, just coming on the market, canned foods, and condensed milk. The list is much longer today. Not only do we have refined sugar, we have high fructose corn syrup, which is much, much worse than sugar. It's this really fake fructose that your body can't do anything with except put it into fat or put it into your bloodstream. You do not get any energy out of high fructose corn syrup. And you know, you don't see high fructose corn syrup on the labels anymore, do you? Because they've gotten permission to just call it fructose. So there was such a uproar about high fructose corn syrup that they changed the way they labeled it. That's how they solved that problem. A white flour, there's your dietary guidelines that gave us permission to eat all the white flour we wanted. Pasteurized milk and skim and low-fat milk, these are not whole foods. These are foods in which valuable components have been destroyed or taken out. Hydrogenated fats and refined vegetable oils, we'll talk more about those. Protein powders. Protein powders are not natural foods. They are very damaging foods, and we will come back to this idea and explain what the science tells us about protein powders. They should not be in the food supply. And finally, all the additives, artificial sweeteners, and really I should add to this the agricultural chemicals like glyphosate. Our food, our soil is just poisoned today. Life in its fullness is Mother Nature obeyed. This was Dr. Price's saying. He didn't believe we could just outsmart Mother Nature. I've heard scientists say that, we figured out how to outsmart Mother Nature. But I'm sorry, Mother Nature bats last, and we cannot outsmart Mother Nature. And to live life in the fullest, we need to learn to obey these principles. And factory foods are not Mother Nature's foods. I call these the 4 horses of the apocalypse. Absolutely number 1 is the industrial seed oils. They cause obesity, they lower IQ in growing children, they cause heart disease, they cause diabetes. All our chronic diseases can be laid first and foremost at industrial seed oils. Second, refined sweeteners of various sorts. Third, these processes that we apply to our food, these high temperature, violent industrial processes like pasteurization and extrusion. And finally, the additives, MSG, Cinnamix, agricultural toxins in our food is just loaded with them. Okay, second principle, and this was called Dr. Price's greatest disappointment. Every diet contained animal products. There were no vegan diets and no vegetarian diets. And Dr. Price really had hoped to find a healthy population living only on plant foods. He was honest enough to say that he did not find this, and that every culture that he visited went to a lot of risk and effort to obtain the animal foods, and all of the sacred foods for having healthy children were animal foods. It is very dangerous and certainly not fair to your offspring to bring children in the world, try to do it on a vegan diet. So animal foods include fish and shellfish, not just the skinless fillets, but the organs, the oil, the bones, the heads. Dr. Price found the best bone structure among those eating seafoods. So think of our South Sea young men and our beautiful Maryland woman, lots of seafood in the diet. Birds, not just the skinless chicken fillets, but the organs, the fat, the skin. Birds were highly prized for their fat. And especially in this part of the world, they had the geese and the ducks. And what they wanted was the fat. Many cultures ate red meat, including beef, goat, sheep, game, with the organ meats and the fat preferred. We should include pig in there as well. Milk and milk products, we find this in the European mainland and Africa. These cultures had dairy products. The cultures that did have goats and cows tended to be taller and always raw or cultured, never pasteurized, never heated. Eggs from pasture-raised chickens or from birds outside. Also reptiles and insects, these are not part of our diet. I'm certainly not saying that you have to eat these things, but we need to recognize that they were nutrient-dense foods that were prized by traditional cultures. Somebody looking for a chair. There's some chairs up front here. So there are certain nutrients that we only get from animal products, starting with vitamin A, and we're going to talk a lot more about vitamins A and D in a moment. They were very high in traditional diets, and we only get these from animal foods. Cholesterol. Now, we've been made to be afraid of cholesterol, but cholesterol is an essential nutrient for growing children. Babies and children do not make cholesterol. They need to get it from their diet. That's why mother's milk is very rich in cholesterol and has special enzymes to ensure the baby absorbs all the cholesterol. You know, in infant formula that is supposed to be so scientific and, worked out in the laboratories and everything, there's no cholesterol in infant formula for our babies. It's skim milk and vegetable oils. There's no cholesterol in infant formula that the babies need to grow normally. When you buy animal milk replacer for animals, the third ingredient is animal fat. So they know that growing mammals need animal fat, which is where we get cholesterol, but they don't put it in human milk formula. We've just gone through 2 years where we've seen this campaign to get people to take shots that kill you. Okay? Do you think there's some kind of conspiracy there? A conspiracy to reduce our numbers or to make us unhealthy? So then I look at formula and dietary guidelines, and I'm thinking, these are the same people. This is the same mentality. There are people out there who don't want us to be healthy and happy and to reproduce. So just be aware, you need to be very suspicious of what you hear. Okay, AD, cholesterol, we know vitamin B12. There's no B12 in plant foods. How do rabbits get their B12? They eat their own droppings. So I don't think any of us want to do that. And finally, certain types of fats. There are very long-chain fats. One's called arachidonic acid, EPA, and DHA. We only get these from animal foods. Now, there are many nutrients that we find in plant foods. They're there, but they're much more easily absorbed from the animal foods. Starting with calcium. There really are only 2 good sources of calcium for human diets. One is dairy foods, and one is bones. And the cultures that didn't have cows or goats or sheep and didn't have milk, they made a special effort to eat the bones. Look at the Eskimos. They fermented their fish and the bones got soft. That's how they got their calcium. And in many cultures, such as Native American culture, they captured small birds, small animals, and they ground up the bones and put it in their food to get calcium. B6, magnesium, iron, zinc, and copper, yeah, they're there in the plant foods, but they're often blocked. They're much more difficult to absorb, and they're much more available in the animal foods, especially zinc. One of the first things that happens in the vegetarian diet, vegan diet, is you get a zinc deficiency, and then you get kind of spacey, and that people interpret that as, you know, being more spiritual or something, but it's zinc deficiency. B12 deficiency is very serious. The early signs are neurological. They include fatigue, tingling in the hands and feet, sleep disorders, and a tendency to irrational anger. Please don't tell me that a vegetarian diet is going to make everybody, peaceful and happy and so forth, because it makes you angry, because you're not getting enough B12. And then we have the serious psychiatric disorders. About 90% of people in mental institutions are severely B12 deficient. And then, of course, serious chronic diseases like multiple sclerosis, that's a B12 problem. Anemia, cancer, and heart disease. There was a very interesting study back in 2014, I believe it was in Australia, and they had self-referencing, in other words, people defined themselves as whether they were vegetarian or ate meat, and then they did this big survey to see what their health problems were. And people on vegetarian diets, they had more tooth decay, more allergies, more mental illness, that's the B12. They needed more health care. They had a poor quality of life. They didn't make as much money. And they had more cancer. And this is one of these big lies they put out there, that if you eat meat, you're going to get cancer. But actually, cancer is more prevalent in the vegetarians. So lots and lots of deficiencies come from plant-based diets: A, D, K, vitamin K, B12, B6, cholesterol, calcium, iron, zinc, lysine and glycine, arachidonic acid, and DHA. It's just a very risky diet, and sooner or later you will develop serious deficiencies. Okay, why don't we, let's see, no, I'll do one more principle and then we'll take a break, okay? So this is the most important principle, and the one that we put the most emphasis on. Dr. Price was taking these foods back to his laboratory in Cleveland and analyzing them for vitamins and minerals. And what he found was that these primitive diets were very high in minerals, high in calcium and other minerals like magnesium, manganese, iodine, copper, zinc. They were just very high in minerals. But the really surprising discovery of Dr. Price was the very high levels of what he calls the fat-soluble vitamins in the traditional diets. And this is where we put our big emphasis. How do we get these vitamins back into the modern diet? So there were 3 fat-soluble vitamins. We're going to talk about the first 2, and then we'll get to the third one. The first 2 are vitamins A and D. Where do we get vitamins A and D? Well, we get them from certain seafoods, fish eggs, just loaded with vitamin D. Fish livers, there's your A and D. There's your fish liver oil. This is why we put such an emphasis on cod liver oil for vitamins A and D. Fish heads, just loaded with vitamin A. Shellfish and oily fish, great sources of vitamin D. And sea mammals like the seal oil was the highest vitamin A food that he had ever tested. It was in seal oil. Okay, moving to the land animals, insects, right? There is a lot of A and D in insects. But more to the point, butter and cream, egg yolks, liver, organ meats, and animal fats from animals raised outside on pasture in the sunlight. Now, what do you notice about this list? Butter, cream, egg yolks, liver, organ meats, animal fat. These are the very foods that we're being told not to eat. We shouldn't have butter and cream because they're too high in saturated fat, and egg yolks are too high in cholesterol, and you'll poison yourself if you eat liver and organ meats. And whatever you do, don't eat animal fat. You eat lean meat and skinless chicken breasts. Okay? And what I'm telling you is just the opposite. If you don't remember anything else from what I've said today, remember this slide. And if you can just maximize your intake of butter, cream, egg yolks, liver, organ meats, animal fat, fish eggs, fish liver oil, shellfish, that's what you need to do to be healthy. It's right there. So these vitamins, A and D, Dr. Price called them activators. He said because without vitamins A and D, you can't use the minerals in your food. He said it is possible to starve for minerals that are abundant in the foods eaten because they cannot be utilized without an adequate quantity of the fat-soluble activators. So if we think of our body as a house or a temple built of bricks and mortar, the mortar are the fat-soluble vitamins and the bricks are the minerals, and we need them both. So you can be eating mineral supplements or organic produce or minerals till they come out your ears. But unless you have these activators, the minerals go to waste. So this is why we put cream in our soup, okay? This is why we put butter on our vegetables. Because with the cream and the butter, we absorb the minerals. And of course, it tastes so much better when we do this, right? Now, the big myth out there, and many of you are probably just saying that Sally doesn't know what she's talking about. If I eat tomatoes and kale, I'll get vitamin A. But there is no vitamin A in plant foods. What's in plant foods are the precursors, the carotenes. And the FDA allows the food people to call this vitamin A. But if you go to a biochemistry textbook or the Merck manual, that will tell you there's no vitamin A in plant foods. What's in plant foods are the carotenes, and the most active carotene is beta-carotene. And yes, some people can convert beta-carotene to vitamin A. It's a very difficult conversion. You have to split the beta-carotene molecule and add oxygen, so very highly dependent on enzymes. Some people can do this a little, but a recent study in England found that half of all women just completely lack the enzymes to do this. So there is really a big problem in converting carotenes to vitamin A. First of all, you need fats. This process takes place in the presence of bile, and if you're not eating fats, you're not producing bile, okay? So we need fats in the diet. Another reason to put cream in your carrot soup and butter on your vegetables, right? Thyroid hormone is involved. Half the population in this country has a thyroid problem, so that would prevent them from making this conversion. Enzymes are involved and vitamin E. But the really important point here is that babies and children, just like they can't make cholesterol, they can't make vitamin A. They simply cannot make this conversion. They don't have the enzymes online. And if you give babies carrots or sweet potatoes, they'll turn orange. But they won't make vitamin A. They can't. They don't have the enzymes. And what we're feeding to our babies and children today is appalling. If you're just giving baby food, about the only thing you can buy is pureed fruits and vegetables. And it's just like giving them sugar, really. Diabetics is the other group that cannot make this conversion, and what do we do with our diabetics? We put them on a low-fat diet. Diabetics need lots of vitamin A. I'm not saying that vitamin A will cure diabetes. It might, but it will certainly prevent all of the side effects of diabetes. We had a diabetic in our family who was on insulin for many years, but he never had any side effects. What are the side effects of diabetes? They are retina problems, kidney problems, and infection. These are all symptoms of vitamin A deficiency. So we put our diabetic on cod liver oil, gave him liver, and he didn't get cured. He still had diabetes, but he didn't suffer from the side effects. If you have poor thyroid function, poor liver function, poor intestinal absorption, these will prevent the conversion of carotene to vitamin A. If you've got a lot of additives in your diet, pesticides, toxins, and even just eating a lot of carotene actually shuts down the conversion mechanism. So the point is, even under optimal conditions, plant sources of carotene cannot supply sufficient vitamin A for optimal health, not in the amounts that we need it, and some people can't make this conversion at all. Vitamin A is critical for so many things in the body, starting with protein assimilation. We cannot use any of the protein we eat without vitamin A. This is why you eat meat with the fat. What happens if you eat lean meat, skim milk, egg whites without the yolks, skinless chicken breasts, or if you take a protein powder? What happens? The science tells us what happens. Your body says, oh, there's protein, I need vitamin A for this protein. It goes to your liver to get the vitamin A it needs, and the quickest way to deplete yourself of this critical vitamin is to eat protein without the fat. Protein without vitamin A. This is why I'm so concerned about protein powders. They deplete you very quickly. And you know, there's no need for them. The one thing we are not lacking in the Western diet is protein. We have plenty of protein. So we need vitamin A for calcium assimilation. This is why you drink whole milk, not skim milk. You need vitamin A for proper growth and prevention of birth defects. When the conception takes place, the first cells in the embryo are stem cells, undifferentiated cells. And within a very short time, within about a week, these stem cells begin to differentiate. And they get a signal, and the signal says, now you guys are going to be heart cells, and you guys are going to be lung cells, and you guys are going to be nerve cells, and so forth. What gives the signal? The signal is vitamin A. Vitamin A is the concert master of fetal development. And if a woman gets pregnant and does not have enough vitamin A stored up to deal with this pregnancy, the heart will not form properly, and she'll have a miscarriage. Or the baby will be born with a defect in the heart, which is very common these days. Can you see the wisdom of eating these nutrient-dense foods like liver and butter and fish eggs and so forth to prepare for pregnancy? So when you do get pregnant, you have everything you need for this cellular differentiation, which starts in week 2 of pregnancy, before you even know you're pregnant. By the time you find it, you get your pregnancy test back, and the doctor gives you prenatal, which usually doesn't have vitamin A in it anyway, it's too late. All of these processes have started. So the wisdom of these so-called primitive people preparing for pregnancy with nutrient-dense foods containing a lot of vitamin A and other important nutrients is totally supported by the science. The science has shown why this works. Okay? The entire endocrine system depends on vitamin A. You can't make thyroid hormones without vitamin A. You can't make immune cells without vitamin A. You can't make sex hormones without vitamin A. You can't make hormones that help you deal with stress without vitamin A. Vitamin A is critical for healthy eyes, skin, and bones. Vitamin A is also important for the completion of tasks. And that's what makes us happy, really, is accomplishing things. But they found in animal studies, the animals depleted of vitamin A, they don't go through the maze, they don't push the levers or whatever. But if they have plenty of vitamin A, they complete the task. We call cholesterol the mother of all hormones. All the sex hormones are made of cholesterol. You really want to take a cholesterol-lowering drug, guys or gals? And these sex hormones are made by tiny changes to the cholesterol, and vitamin A is involved in every one of those little arrows there, every step of the way. So you can't make estrogen without vitamin A, you can't make testosterone without vitamin A. And then over on the right-hand side, we have what we call the adrenal cortex hormones. These help regulate blood pressure, blood sugar, They help us deal with stress. They help us heal. And again, they're made of cholesterol, and we can't make these conversions unless we have plenty of vitamin A in the diet. So when you're under a lot of stress, if you are deficient in vitamin A, well, everything is stressful. Stress is very difficult to handle. If you're eating a lot of vitamin A, stress is exhilarating. You know, it's a challenge. Uh-oh. What did I do here? Next, please. How do I do this? Go away. I just go to the next one. How's that? Help. Can anyone help me?
Is there an escape button?
There we go. Escape. Thank you. So, vitamin A is depleted by stress. We know that. Too much protein. We are not a high protein diet. We want adequate protein, up to 20% of calories, no more. Cold weather depletes vitamin A, fever and illness. It's very important for children to have a fever. We're not letting our children have fevers, but children who have fevers are much less prone to cancer later in life. Fevers jumpstart the immune system. But fevers also deplete vitamin A, and a child with a raging fever can end up blind or with seizures. So when you are taking care of a child with a fever, you give them egg yolk smoothie, egg yolks and cream, or you make a little pate or something, give them cod liver oil so they get plenty of vitamin A. Physical exertion depletes vitamin A. This is why our athletes burn out, and exposure to toxins. The reason most things are toxic is because they interfere with vitamin A. So if your neighbor is spraying Roundup, if you work in a print shop or cleaners or hairdresser, you need more vitamin A. It doesn't mean you can't deal with it, but you need to take your cod liver oil and eat your liver and get plenty of vitamin A. Okay, then we have the vitamin D myth, which is to get adequate vitamin D, all you need to do is expose your hands and face to sunlight 10 minutes a day and you'll get all the vitamin D you need. We now know that this is not true. We only can make vitamin D when the sunlight's directly overhead. And at this part of the world, that's July and August at midday. You want to sunbathe here in July and August midday? Well, be my guest. But the truth is, traditional cultures got their vitamin D from food. And it's pretty much the same list of foods. Fish liver oils, fish eggs, shellfish, oily fish. There's those insects again. Butter, egg yolks. Egg yolks are a really good source of vitamin D if those chickens are outside in the sun. Organ meats, fat of birds and pigs, and blood. Many cultures ate blood, and blood is a great source of vitamin D. Like vitamin A, vitamin D is necessary for pretty much everything. Healthy bones, proper growth, absorbing minerals, good muscle tone, reproduction, healthy skin. We need vitamin D to make insulin for our pancreases to work, immune system, etc., etc. We need vitamin D to feel good. We need vitamin D to make feel-good chemicals. So where do we get these vitamins in the traditional American diet? We got them mainly from dairy foods until the Second World War, and this crazy idea that we have to put our cows inside. Our cows were outside on pasture. We had pastured butter, cheese. We had chickens were outside. We ate cream. We also took our cod liver oil, and we also had liver and other organ meats, sausage, pate, liverwurst, scrapple. How many of you eat scrapple? Wonderful, wonderful food, organ meats. And it's a typical food for this part of the world. There it is, okay? Yeah, get your organ meats every morning for breakfast. And people cooked in lard. How many of you cook in lard? Good. Wonderful source of vitamin D. Great cooking fat. We've been told that lard is bad for us. That's the vegetable oil industry demonizing their competition. I love this old ad. They're happy because they eat lard. But it's true, the vitamin D in lard helps the body make neurochemicals that protect against depression. Okay, last fat-soluble vitamin is Activator X. Dr. Price didn't know what it was, but we finally figured out it's vitamin K2, the animal form of vitamin K, which the animals make out of the vitamin K1 in the grass. That's why it's so important to have our animals out in grass, okay? Vitamin K plays a very important role in growth. A sign of deficiency is the underdevelopment of the middle third of the face. We need it to put calcium and phosphorus in the bones and teeth. So what prevents tooth decay? It is vitamin K2 in your saliva. You want a lot of vitamin K2 in your diet, and then the saliva makes sure that you're constantly rebuilding your teeth with phosphorus and calcium. It prevents calcification and inflammation of the arteries. What vitamin K does is make sure that the calcium and phosphorus go to the bones and the teeth where they belong, and not to the soft tissues where they don't belong. It's involved in the synthesis of myelin and supports learning capacity, and it's vital for normal reproduction. Lord Calvert, who was one of the first aristocrats, he was in Virginia. He had a big plantation there, and he wrote something very interesting about the native people. He said if a native couple couldn't get pregnant, they went on the bear fat diet, and they ate nothing but bear fat, and it worked within a month. They would get pregnant within a month. And we have tested bear fat, and it is the highest vitamin K2 food that we've ever tested. So these three vitamins work as a synergy. A and D tell the cells to make certain proteins, and then vitamin K activates the proteins. So they all work together. You don't want to take these as supplements. If you're taking vitamin D, you're going to become deficient in A and K. And during this COVID thing, so many people were taking 10,000 units of vitamin D. Very dangerous. Very, very dangerous. And then if you take vitamin A, you'll become deficient in D and K. And that, by the way, what people were doing was taking 10,000 D and taking a vitamin K supplement. What does that do to your vitamin A? It just uses it up. So we do not recommend supplements, especially of these three vitamins. You need to get them from food. Oh, one more thing. So one thing that vitamin K does is it prevents the closing of the growth plates before they're supposed to close. And we have growth plates at the end of the long bones. So if you have plenty of vitamin K in your diet, you're going to grow tall because the growth plates don't close, okay? We also have growth plates in the maxilla, at the side of the maxilla, the upper jawbone. And so if you want the face to be wide, get plenty of vitamin K in the diet while they're growing. So those growth plates don't close. Where do we get vitamin K? K2, bear fat. Emu oil and high vitamin butter oil. The high vitamin butter oil was developed by Dr. Price. He found that if he gave cod liver oil and the butter oil together, that's when he got the best results. But all poultry liver and poultry fat, so chicken liver, goose fat, duck fat, these are all great sources of vitamin K. Aged cheeses, egg yolks, butter, and fatty meats. Again, it's pretty much the same foods. The cow is a sacred animal. We think of her as a step-up transformer. She spends her whole day, or should be spending her whole day, in the sunlight, eating green grass, and making vitamin A out of the carotenes, making K2 out of the K1, and making vitamin D out of the sunlight. She is a sacred animal, and we honor her by consuming fat, okay? Consuming the liver, consuming the whole animal. The pastured poultry model, this is what we do in our farm. The chickens are outside. Egg yolks are a powerful source of vitamin D if these chickens are outside on pasture. And it can be done on a large scale. So you can see the picture on the right. There's no need to put our chickens inside. People have developed these large movable chicken coops, I've seen this done on scales, maybe 10 of these with 1,000 chickens in each one, moving back and forth across the pasture. So it can be done on a large scale. This is what we call the efficient industrial model, where we confine our animals inside. And this is not only cruel to the animals, but it's cruel to us, because we're not going to get what our bodies need to get when we eat these animals. We tested some egg yolks. We found 8 times more D and 2 times more A in the pastured egg yolk compared to the supermarket yolk. The organic was somewhere in the middle. And we found 10 to 13 times more vitamin A and 3 times more D in butter made from grass-fed cream compared to the one on the left I made from cream from Costco. It's white. We did one analysis and we found 1,000 units of vitamin D in 1 tablespoon of lard from pigs raised outside on pasture. So lard is a powerful source of vitamin D. Now, in the spirit of full disclosure, I am a cheesemaker, so I have a little prejudice here. But raw cheese from pastured animals is a complete food, a wonderful source of K2. It's also a probiotic food and wonderful food for growing children. Key nutrients for brain development, again, vitamins A, D, and K. When your child is growing, you want your child to be smart and successful. They need these fat-soluble vitamins. Choline is, your body needs to make connections in the brain. It gets that from liver and egg yolks. A DHA, that's our cod liver oil, again, liver, butter, and egg yolks, so pretty much all the same foods. Zinc is critical for neurological development. Best source of zinc is red meat, also shellfish, and cholesterol, again, from the rich animal foods. No food is higher in nutrients than liver. Look at B6 and B12 compared to red meat. If you're on a budget and can't afford to eat red meat every day, if you eat liver once a week, you're going to get the same nutrients as eating red meat. Excuse me, if you just eat liver once a week, right, you're going to get the same nutrients as eating red meat with every meal. The 1940s newspaper article, liver should be served at least once a week. This is what they were telling women to do, and women did it. They made liver. This was a film crew that was at our house, and I was so struck. They were such nice people. All of them had naturally straight teeth and broad jaws. And I got to asking them what they ate when they grew up. And then they said, well, my mother didn't cook a lot. None of them were on raw milk. They didn't have cod liver oil. But when I kind of drilled down, I said, did you eat liver growing up? And all of them said yes. In fact, one said, my mother didn't like to cook, but she loved liver, so she made liver twice a week. So one of my big goals is, how do we get liver back into our food supply? They do this much better in Europe because a lot of the sausage and liverwurst and stuff contains liver. And we need to get the liver back into our sausage and luncheon meats and things like that. So I say it's a way, we need to make offal taste good, right? So liver is the ultimate superfood, and there's lots of ways to eat it. And I hope that we can figure out more ways of getting into your children. One good thing you can do when you're making meatloaf or meatballs, you puree some chicken liver and just put it in there. They won't know it's in there. And cod liver oil, very important for children to have cod liver oil. This is an old ad for cod liver oil. Your baby, give him the help he needs to build a well-shaped head, a strong straight back, sound even teeth. Daily use is important. There's my grandchildren getting their cod liver oil. Easy to get them to do it. All right, we've talked about the 3 principles enumerated by Dr. Price. Now we're going into some that we have added based on lots and lots of research of traditional cultures. The 4th principle has to do with cooking. Should we cook our food? And the answer is yes. This is what human beings do. We do cook our food. especially grains and plant foods. Cellulose is impossible to digest unless it's broken down by cooking. All cultures cook their food, but they all also ate some of their animal foods raw. Not all raw, and I'm very concerned about this movement to have all raw meat, all raw animal foods, because they also cooked their foods. Cooking makes the proteins in animal foods more available to us. But there are good reasons to eat some raw animal foods. So examples of raw animal foods include raw milk, butter, and cream, raw cheeses, raw and marinated fish, raw shellfish like oysters, and traditional ethnic raw meat dishes such as steak tartare, carpaccio, and kibbeh, which is raw lamb from the Middle East. I'm intrigued by the fact that every country in Europe has at least one raw animal food that's eaten occasionally. Not all the time, but they do eat raw meat occasionally. And I think one of the reasons that we do need raw animal foods is to get B6. Vitamin B6 is very fragile. It's easily destroyed by heat. And B6 deficiency is linked to so many of our diseases: diabetes and heart disease, nervous disorders, cancer, kidney disease, animal asthma, all kinds of pregnancy problems. B6 deficiency is very much linked to alcoholism. And the alcoholic who's trying to recover needs to eat a lot of raw animal food, raw meat. Sickle cell anemia, even carpal tunnel syndrome is associated with B6 deficiency. At the same time, a lot of things become more available when they're cooked. I believe that the iron in meat is liberated by cooking. I've seen people become anemic from eating only raw meat, even though the iron is in there. So we want to eat our meat in both ways, both cooked and raw. So to cook or not to cook, meat and seafood, both, raw and cooked. Dairy food should never be heated. So raw or fermented. Grains, we'll talk about grains. They're soured first and then always cooked. Fruits, raw and cooked. I'm one who cannot tolerate a lot of raw fruit, but if it's cooked, I'm fine. And vegetables should be mostly cooked. There's very few vegetables that we can eat raw. The tender salad vegetables like lettuce, cucumbers, tomatoes, that's fine. But things like kale, spinach, beans, potatoes, these all need to be cooked. Otherwise, they're toxic to us. And this gets me into my favorite subject, that of raw milk. I'm going to race through these slides because we have been told that raw milk is this terribly dangerous food that we should never, ever touch. That's the message coming out from the federal government. So what does that tell you? They're wrong, right? They're always wrong, okay? Raw milk is actually uniquely safe. Consider the calf born in the muck. First thing he does is get up and suckle on his mother's manure-covered teat. How can that calf possibly survive? How has any mammal survived with such a dirty system, you know? And that's because raw milk contains multiple redundant systems of bioactive components that reduce or eliminate pathogenic bacteria. So it has lactoperoxidase. This is an enzyme that uses hydrogen peroxide to destroy pathogens. And it's in all animal milk. It's higher in animal milk than human milk. And then these twin sister of lactoperoxidase is lactoferrin, which steals iron away from pathogens. Pathogens love iron. That's why you get pathogens where there's a lot of rust, for example. Pathogens love iron, and what lactoferrin does is ensures that the baby absorbs all the iron so the pathogens don't have any iron to grow on, but it also does a double duty, ensures that the baby absorbs all that iron and doesn't become anemic. Raw milk contains all the components of blood, neutrophils, lymphocytes, immunoglobulins. In fact, in World War I, they used raw milk for blood transfusions. It contains everything that's in blood except red blood cells. And so what raw milk does for the infant, it builds the immune system for the infant. Special fats and carbohydrates, oligosaccharides, for example. When they discovered oligosaccharides in raw milk, they thought, well, nature probably made a mistake because we can't digest oligosaccharides. But what does digest oligosaccharides? Friendly gut bacteria, all right? And many other components, mucins, which keep the bad guys from sticking to the intestinal wall, hormones and growth factors. I mean, every year we're discovering new factors in raw milk that protect the infant, help build a healthy gut wall, and ensure the assimilation of all the nutrients. Beneficial bacteria, bifidus factor, B12 binding protein ensures that the infant absorbs all the B12. Lactoglobulins, which adhere to A and D and ensure their full assimilation. So this is a five-fold protective system. 1, it destroys pathogens. 2, it stimulates the immune system. 3, builds a healthy gut wall. 4, prevents the absorption of pathogens and toxins. And 5, assures the assimilation of all the nutrients. And all of these are destroyed by pasteurization. Yeah. They're mostly reduced in pasteurized milk, completely in ultra-pasteurized milk, and most milk today is ultra-pasteurized, including organic milk. And look at infant formula. You know, there's this myth that infant formula is safe. It is very unsafe. There have been lots of illnesses and many deaths from infected infant formula. And yet they have the gall to criticize raw milk, which as far as I know hasn't caused a death in 30 years. So this is a lot of small print, but just, you know, if you have time to read all this later, just shows what happens to all these nutrients when the milk is pasteurized. Vitamin C is destroyed, B6 is destroyed, the others are not very well absorbed. Every vitamin and mineral in raw milk has a special enzyme that ensures it is 100% absorbed. No other food is like this. And when you pasteurize, then your body has to produce these enzymes, and it's a big stress and takes a lot of energy. Dairy itself is a very safe food. Even pasteurized dairy is safe and raw dairy is safe. The most unsafe food is fish and shellfish, which oysters cause 30 deaths a year. You get 30 deaths a year from raw oysters. Yet you can still buy raw oysters, right? Why is that? Because politicians eat oysters. You know? They're not going to let the FDA take away oysters. So as soon as enough politicians have seen their children or grandchildren benefit from raw milk, we'll have raw milk everywhere. And there have been many, many outbreaks from pasteurized milk. The most recent, 2007, there were 3 deaths from fully pasteurized milk in Massachusetts. The health officials say that the reason we've had the decline in all these infectious diseases is because we pasteurize our milk. But here is a graph going back to 1900. You can see the decline in bacteria and diphtheria, whooping cough, measles, etc. Mandatory pasteurization was instituted in 1948. So all of these diseases had mostly disappeared before mandatory pasteurization. And as I said, there have been lots of illnesses from other foods. Actually, oysters was 15 deaths per year. Eggs were 30. 30 deaths per year from eggs. We still can buy eggs, right? So, in summary, raw milk is actually the safest food. It's safer than any other food. It has its own built-in safety mechanisms. Claims that raw milk is unsafe are based on 40-year-old science. It would not hold up in a court of law. Meanwhile, pasteurized milk is causing increasing health problems in our children, especially associated with allergies and asthma and frequent ear infections. If a child has frequent ear infections, the doctor says take him off of milk, because pasteurized milk is just not healthy. It's very allergenic. This is lactoferrin. This is what the proteins in raw milk look like. They're very complicated three-dimensional proteins. They're very fragile. And when you pasteurize, it's like bringing your hands down on a bunch of Tinker Toys. Well, somebody asked me after a talk, what are Tinker Toys? So people don't remember. Like bringing your hands down on a bunch of Legos, okay? And what happens with pasteurization is a rapid heating, and the proteins are flattened. And then your body says, this is a foreign protein. It has to mount an immune response. And this accounts for the allergies, the immune diseases later in life, juvenile diabetes, etc. So raw milk digests itself. Your body doesn't have to make any enzymes, doesn't have to do anything to digest milk. Once milk gets into the alkaline pH of the small intestine, the enzymes are activated by that pH and they digest the milk for you. Whereas pasteurized milk is very difficult to digest, requires a lot of energy and enzymes that your body has to make. Very interesting studies done in the late 1930s. The rat on top was given only raw milk, a very robust rat, good fur, good development. The ones below were given pasteurized milk. They had hairless areas due to B6 deficiency, and then very poor development. They were very scrawny. And then they looked at the bones. The pasteurized milk rats had longer bones and much denser bones. They were 206 grams compared to 146 grams. So there was the same amount of calcium in both the raw and pasteurized milk, right? But what happened? It's much more easily absorbed in the raw milk, and it goes to the bones and the teeth. And we've been talking this morning about bone structure, and getting these strong bones in the face. We are lucky in America that we are a dairy country, and now raw milk is so widely available. And I think it's a very important component of the diet of growing children. And these were guinea pig studies. This shows where that calcium goes when it doesn't go to the bones and teeth. So the ones on whole raw milk had excellent growth, no abnormalities. Those on whole pasteurized milk, poor growth, muscle stiffness, emaciation and weakness. They died within a year, and when they did an autopsy, they found the calcium in the soft tissues, streaked in the heart and joints, and they didn't say arteries, but that's what atherosclerosis is. It's calcium in the arteries. And when pasteurization first came in, there were doctors saying this is causing atherosclerosis, the pasteurized milk. And it's my favorite study, 1931, Ohio State University, still doing good research in those days. The rats on whole raw milk had good growth, sleek coats, clear eyes, and they were nice little rats. They enjoyed being picked up and petted by the researchers. The ones on pasteurized milk had rough coats, slow growth, their eyes lackluster. They were anemic. Why would they be anemic? There's the same amount of iron in raw and pasteurized milk. But the lactoferrin is destroyed, so they're not absorbing the iron, okay? And they were very irritable. When they were picked up by the researchers, they tended to bite, okay? So I've had many, many parents tell me, oh, we just made one change. We switched from pasteurized to raw milk, and I can't believe how my kids have changed. They're so much nicer. They don't get in trouble. They're doing better in school. You know, I really didn't like my kids until we put them on raw milk. So you'll see a big improvement in the behavior of your children if you get them in raw milk. And since ancient times, they used raw milk as like a fasting diet to cure many diseases. This is what the Mayo Clinic was set up for, the raw milk diet. They call it the milk cure. Many studies have shown that raw milk protects against asthma, especially if it started in the very young years. And asthma kills 9 people a day in this country, many of them children. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we had something that prevented asthma? Well, we do. It's called raw milk. We also did a survey. We found that 82% of people diagnosed with lactose intolerance could drink raw milk without any problem. Raw milk is also a great source of glutathione. This is our key compound for detoxification. Really needed because we live in a very toxic world, okay? It's in the whey portion of the milk. So this is something that won't be in cheese, but will be in the milk. But it only works if it's in its raw, undenatured state. And this explains the success of the milk cure, because not only were they nourishing themselves, they were detoxifying at the same time. So we recommend raw milk for growing children, calcium for optimal growth, strong bones, strong teeth. Raw milk protects against asthma, allergies, and eczema. It builds the immune system. It protects us against toxins and helps build a healthy gut wall. Unfortunately, we have made milk in this country into an industrial product. I'm all for industry when we build cars and computers and airplanes and roads. I think industry's done wonderful things for us. But it is inappropriate to apply these industrial standards to our food, and especially to nature's most perfect food, which is milk. So these cows never leave their stalls. They never get green grass. Their average lifespan is 42 months. They're milked 3 times a day, usually for 600 days without a break, and then they are sent to the abattoir. All fast food hamburger in this country comes from this industrial milk, these industrial cows. And yes, that is manure that they're standing in. Now, we have a wonderful system that protects against pathogens in raw milk, but it can be overwhelmed. And we would never, ever recommend drinking raw milk from this system, only from pasture-fed cows. So we've made it into factory food, where all of the goodness of the milk is destroyed. It's such a waste. When you think about it, all of this milk production, the nutrients are wasted because of industrial processing. And there was a study very recently, this was done in China. They looked at the effects of processing on milk proteins, on boiling, presumably to be like pasteurization, spray drying, which is how they make powdered milk, freeze drying, and microwaving. All of these methods, including the freeze drying, resulted in significant degradation and oxidation of the milk proteins. Fed to rats, processed milk. All 4 processes caused damage to the plasma, liver, and the brain, and adversely affected learning and memory in the rats. Okay? Raw milk is a wonderful, perfect food, but as soon as we process it by any measure, except making cheese, of course, we ruin it. And we're seeing a relentless decline in IQ levels of our children. Could this be the reason? And this is what they get for lunch. Non-fat spray-dried milk is the major ingredient in infant formula, flavored milk for children's lunches, whey protein powders, and non-fat milk. They actually add spray-dried milk to non-fat milk. So once you start doing these industrial processes, your milk becomes a poison. And milk consumption is declining in this country, relentlessly going down, and people just can't drink it anymore. It's too allergenic. So we have a wonderful website. We set up this website even before the foundation. 1998, we started on this website. We just updated it, revised it. We have a map on it, and you can find raw milk anywhere in the country, pretty much. Okay, 5th characteristic of traditional diets. They all had high levels of enzymes and beneficial bacteria in their diet. And I have these pictures of guys in turbans because the enzymes are the magic workers in our cells. We have 3 basic types of enzymes. Metabolic enzymes, there's thousands of them. They're produced in our cells. The digestive enzymes, there are about 22. They're produced in the pancreas and the salivary glands. And then we do have enzymes in some of our foods, amylases for carbohydrates, lipases for digesting lipids, fats, and proteases for digesting proteins. By the way, a lot of the metabolic enzymes have to do with detoxification, getting rid of toxins and poisons, and this is why we're not really big on punishing fasts, skipping food, putting your body through, some kind of tests or whatever. Seems very medieval to us. If you're well nourished, your body is always detoxifying. But what we want to look at are these digestive enzymes. If you are getting enzymes from your food, then you don't have to make as many digestive enzymes. And so you're going to have more energy for yourself. And food enzymes are destroyed by heat. So this means that we need some of these enzyme-rich raw foods. These include raw dairy products. Raw dairy products are very rich in enzymes. Raw meat and fish. Raw honey has enzymes that digest carbohydrates. Tropical fruits are actually full of enzymes for digesting meat. There was one tribe in the Amazon that Dr. Price visited, and they had this rule that they never ate meat without eating bananas at the same time. So there's digestive enzymes, there's proteases in the bananas. Cold pressed oils like extra virgin olive oil, wine, and unpasteurized beer, but what we're really looking at is the lacto-fermented foods. Every traditional culture in the world had fermented foods, and these foods are very rich in enzymes. You eat them along with cooked foods for helping you to digest the cooked foods. When you cook your food, you destroy all the enzymes, but when you eat lacto-fermented foods with your meal, you get those enzymes put back in. So we're thinking of things like sauerkraut and pickles. Did you know that salami and these artisan meats, they're all fermented foods, lacto-fermented? Dairy products such as yogurt, we can ferment fruits, we can ferment fish, and beverages such as kombucha. These are real digestive aids. They're full of enzymes, and they help you digest your food. At the same time, with these lacto-fermented foods, we're getting beneficial bacteria. And we live in very interesting times. We have seen a complete paradigm shift in the last 20 years from the notion that bacteria are evil and attack us and make us sick, to the realization that bacteria are our friends, and the healthy human body lives in symbiotic relationship with 6 pounds of bacteria, healthy bacteria, in our digestive tract. 6 pounds, okay? These bacteria help digest our food, they help assimilate our food, they actually create vitamins, they protect us against toxins, and they create feel-good chemicals that help us feel good. So now we know that without good bacteria, we're dead. So we want to make sure that we're always repopulating the intestinal tract with bacteria. Got a little wind back there. So these are some recipes from my book, Nourishing Traditions. We sell these in our store. They're being sold in many places now. You can get them on the internet. These are raw, lacto-fermented condiments, full of enzymes, full of good bacteria that we eat in small amounts with our meals. And they are delicious. Whoops. We're also seeing the lacto-fermented beverages such as kombucha. Kvass is usually made with beets. And there are some sour grain drinks out there. I'm not sure they're still available in the States. But we need more of these. And this is what we should be consuming with meals. The Africans are the absolute masters of these, so they call them beer, but they're lacto-fermented. They're very sour. And they make them with various things such as maize, sorghum, bananas. Rich sources of enzymes, protective bacteria, vitamin K2, and B vitamins. These are actually given to babies in Africa to build up their immune system, to protect them against malaria. And unfortunately, when the missionaries arrived, because these beverages had some alcohol in them, they made them stop. See? But they're very good and very protective for the babies. sixth principle has to do with grains. How many of you struggle with grains, are on gluten-free or, yeah, quite a few. The thing about grains is they have a lot of toxins in them, a lot of what we call anti-nutrients. They have enzyme inhibitors. Now, we just learned how important enzymes are. We don't want to eat things that block our enzymes. Phytic acid, which blocks mineral absorption. Tannins and lectins, which are very irritating. Complex starches and sugars, gluten and cellulose. Some of these things are impossible to digest, impossible for humans to digest. The proper preparation of these seed foods breaks down these toxins, neutralizes these toxins, and makes the nutrients in the grains more available to us. The herbivore who eats grains and grasses has a complex digestive system of anywhere from 2 to 4 chambers, 2 to 4 stomachs. And they're basically fermenting these foods. At least one of these chambers acts as a fermentation tank to break down the grains. The human stomach is a simple stomach, maybe different sizes, but we don't have a fermentation tank in our bodies. We have to do this before we eat the grains. So the proper preparation of seed foods imitates the factors in nature that neutralize these preservatives and allows the seed to sprout. All of these anti-nutrients are like a plastic coating on the seed that keeps everything inside fresh. And we don't want to eat preservatives, even if they're natural preservatives. So we break down the preservatives by proper preparation, and then the grains are safe for us. So the 4 factors are moisture, warmth, slight acidity, and time. This is what seeds need to sprout. And this is the same thing we need for preparing our grains. This is a wonderful photograph of a Cherokee woman preparing the traditional cornbread, which was cooked. The maize was cooked and then wrapped in a corn husk and put aside for 2 weeks and allowed to ferment. And only then did they use that cornmeal for making tortillas or porridge or masa or whatever. It was fermented for 2 weeks first. Now this is how most of our grains are made today. This is called an extruder. And the slurry of grains is forced out of this tiny hole at high temperature, high pressure. And what comes out is a Cheerio or a cornflake or a shredded wheat or puffed grains. And this is how most of our grains are eaten today. Even the health food store, these are these processed cereals. There's not a lot of research on these cereals, except I know of some unpublished research. One was the famous cornflake study where the rats given the cornflakes died before the rats given the box that the cornflakes came in. And they didn't just fade away and die of starvation. They became agitated and ran around their cages and bit each other and died of convulsions. So what this extrusion process does to the proteins in the grain is similar to what pasteurization does to the proteins in the milk. It destroys them and renders them very toxic, neurotoxic. And most children in this country start their day with this stuff. No wonder they can't sit still in school. I call this a cruel breakfast, puffed grains, skim milk, right? And the orange juice. Now, would you rather I didn't tell you about the orange juice? Okay. So the way they make orange juice today is by squeezing the whole orange, and then they get the oil out, and they make citrus peel cake with the peels, and then they freeze the juice. But the thing about oranges is that they get the worst pesticides of any crop in this country. They are cholinesterase inhibitors. And the way they prepare this orange juice, they even put enzymes in to get everything out of the skin. And so all of that is coming into the juice. And there has been quite a good study, the Honolulu Heart Study, which also looked at Alzheimer's. And the number 1 correlation with Alzheimer's was drinking fruit juice. So it's because of these pesticides on the fruits, especially the citrus fruit. These are diabetes starter kits here. Put you on the blood sugar roller coaster. How do we get off the blood sugar roller coaster? We don't have sugar with our meals, and we eat plenty of fats, because fats modulate the release of sugar and starch into the bloodstream. So here's some good breakfast. We have some beautiful pastured eggs. I put extra yolks in the eggs, cooked them in butter, and these are some leftover potatoes, which I've grated and cooked in lard. Wonderful breakfast. We want a smoothie. We make smoothies with whole yogurt, egg yolks, fruit, and coconut oil. Or you can have fried eggs with some beautiful no nitrate bacon and fruit. And we put our fruit in the bacon pan. So we eat the pineapple and the apples and tomatoes cooked in the bacon grease. And as far as I know, this is the only diet that allows you to eat pineapple cooked in bacon grease. And your scrapple. Okay. Suppose you want grains for breakfast. Suppose you want cereal. We're going to make some oatmeal. We start with rolled oats. We soak them overnight. We have to think ahead. You soak them overnight in warm water with a tablespoon of something acidic. Remember, moisture, warmth, slight acidity, and time. That's what you want to break down the anti-nutrients in the oats. And oats have plenty of them, too. And you soak that in warm water overnight. Next morning, you bring some water to a boil. That's when you add your salt. You always want to cook these soaked oats. And I know people are eating muesli and stuff, these raw oats. That's the recipe for digestive problems. So you cook the oats until they're soft. You might want to cover and let them sit for a few minutes. There's our delicious oatmeal. You might want to put something crunchy on it, like nuts, maybe. Anybody here like sweet things? Everybody likes sweet things. We're not telling you not to eat sweet things. Just be careful about it. Be moderate. Use natural sweeteners. I like to put maple sugar on my oatmeal. But I also always put an animal fat, butter or cream. Okay? Why? You've gone through the soaking process. You've liberated all the minerals. You can't use any of those minerals without the vitamin A. Okay? Also, putting the fat on the oatmeal gets you off that blood sugar roller coaster. It slows down the release of sugar into the bloodstream. So I like to put, I usually put about 4 tablespoons of butter on my oatmeal. Wow. But you can put more on if you want to. That's what oatmeal's for, right? A vehicle for butter. That's what your vegetables are for. They're a vehicle for butter. We say get to know sourdough. This is kind of bread you want to eat. There was a wonderful study in Italy where they found that people diagnosed with celiac disease could eat sourdough bread without any problem. Now, it should be organic. Now, this is the one country in the world that allows the farmers to spray Roundup on the oats just before they're harvested, on the wheat just before it's harvested as a desiccant. And so you're getting the full blast of glyphosate, which is the ingredient in Roundup. Very harmful, very harmful. So sourdough bread should be organic sourdough, and that's how you eat your bread. You want to see teeth marks in the butter. Soy foods, we've been leading the charge against soy foods. They are very toxic. Lots of phytic acid, enzyme inhibitors. They have isoflavones in them. These are the estrogen compounds that not only cause endocrine disruption, but they block thyroid function. If you're eating a lot of soy, you'll get a thyroid problem. Very irritating to the gut. They cause kidney stones, and very high in manganese, which can cause brain damage in infants. It is truly a toxic food. And the only way you can get rid of these things is for a very long, slow fermentation, which does not get rid of the isoflavones, the estrogens. So we're talking about all these horrible modern soy foods. The traditional foods were consumed in very small amounts and were fermented. I can't stress enough, soy foods are imitation foods, You could not make these foods in your kitchen. They require a horrendous amount of processing. And the average consumption of soy in Asian diets is very low, not more than 2 tablespoons a day. And in animal studies, soy has caused reproductive problems in many species of animals, but our government insists it doesn't cause reproductive problems in humans. So which will it be, soy milk or real milk? Okay. And in the soy milk, you've got your synthetic vitamin D, emulsifiers, refined sweeteners, and a very toxic dose of phytoestrogens. And the baby on soy infant formula receives a dose of estrogens 10 times greater as a function of body weight than the level found in Asian diets. A baby on soy formula has 13,000 to 22,000 times more estrogens in its bloodstream than a baby on milk-based formula. And those estrogens have their effects even on babies. We have some good resources on soy, including our little flyer. You might keep a couple of those in your purse. You see somebody buying soy milk or something, just hand them the flyer. Good non-confrontational way. Okay, I'm kind of racing here. So 7th principle, how much fat did these people eat? Well, it varied. Some of the African diets were fairly low in fat, 30% of calories. We saw the Eskimo diet was 80% of calories as fat. And my experience is that most people in the Western world do better on a higher fat diet, anywhere from 50 to 70% of calories. But one thing that is consistent across all these diets is only 4% of calories come from polyunsaturated fatty acids. So I just have to give you a tiny little chemistry lesson about fats. Okay, so we have 3 main types of fats. We have saturated fats, which are mostly in animal fats, but also coconut oil. These tend to be solid at room temperature. Monounsaturated oils are liquid at room temperature, but solid in the refrigerator. And then the polyunsaturated oils are liquid, even in the refrigerator. This is what these molecules look like. Saturated fat is a straight molecule. They pack together easily, and this is why they are solid at room temperature. The monounsaturates have a little kink in them. Everywhere you have one of these double bonds, they're missing 2 hydrogens, and you have a little bend in the molecule. So the monounsaturates are going to be liquid at room temperature. The polyunsaturates are real kinky, okay? And we have 2 types, the omega-6, which has 2 little bends, and the omega-3, which has 3 little bends in it. The key point here is that saturated and monounsaturated are safe. They don't break down. You can store them for a long time. They don't oxidize. They don't create free radicals. The polyunsaturates are not safe. They do break down. They do get oxidized. They create free radicals. They break down into smaller components called aldehydes. The most familiar aldehyde is formaldehyde, right? Formaldehyde. And the undertakers are saying that they don't need as much formaldehyde anymore because the bodies are also already partially pickled, okay? That's because of the polyunsaturated oils. They're breaking down into these aldehydes. And the processing of these oils requires heat, high heat, 4 times. So, once you apply heat to these fragile oils, it's even quicker. And then they put they deodorize them, they put a little yellow color in them. What starts out as a black, smelly gunk ends up in the bottle looking fresh. And then they tell you to cook with these things, and you get even more oxidation. So I think of these fat molecules as kind of like having knives sticking out. Okay? And here's a very good example of what they do. So on the right, that's what arteries look like in people who are getting a lot of polyunsaturates. Whereas if you eat saturated fat, you're going to have nice, clear, smooth arteries. Exactly the opposite of what they're telling you. Many problems associated with the consumption of polyunsaturated oils. This is all in the scientific literature. Increased cancer, number one, more cancer. Heart disease. They age you. They cause wrinkles. They disrupt the immune system. They cause liver damage. They are particularly disruptive to the reproductive organs of the lungs, the two sites of the most cancer in the Western world. Smoking can cause cancer, but not anything like the polyunsaturated oils. A lot of people stop smoking, they're still getting lung cancer. Okay? And in children, they impair growth and depress learning ability. Of course, we're told that we shouldn't be eating saturated fat. It's accused of everything that's happening today. None of this is true. It's just absolutely not true. Saturated fats, again, this is all from the scientific literature, are very important for healthy bones. They actually support heart function. They protect the liver. Your lungs cannot function without saturated fat. I wonder how many lung doctors know this. Anyone having lung problems needs to eat more saturated fat. Asthma, studies have shown that there's less asthma in children who get whole milk, for example. It's all out there in the literature. Saturated fats support the immune system. They work synergistically with the essential fatty acids, and they support the body's detoxification. This was from Europe, 2005, I think. These top is the countries with the lowest saturated fat consumption. You can see various rates of heart disease. On the bottom, the countries with the highest saturated fat consumption, they have the lowest rates of heart disease. So at the bottom there you have France. It's the French paradox, right? Then you have Switzerland, Netherlands, Iceland, Belgium, Finland, Austria. All these paradoxes, all these countries where they eat a lot of saturated fat and they have low levels of heart disease. You know, if a theory has so many paradoxes, there's something wrong with the theory. The theory is wrong, okay? So in primitive diets, you had about 4% of calories as these polyunsaturates. They were in the food. We need a small amount of these. They're called essential fatty acids. We can't make them. We need them. But they're in the food. They're protected when they're in the food. The modern diet is 20% or more of calories as polyunsaturated fatty acids. These are in the vegetable oils, the industrial seed oils. And not only is it way too much, way more than we need, but they're rancid and oxidized. So we don't have to worry about supplementing with these things. We get them from the foods that we eat. The other thing they do with these oils is they hydrogenate them to make them hard, like for margarine and shortening. Now, I will say there's a lot less of this today than there was in the past, thanks mainly to the work of my co-author, Mary Enig. But let's just quickly go through how they make trans fats, partially hydrogenated fats. So they start with the cheapest oils. They're extracted with high temperature and pressure. Then they use hexane, which is gasoline, to remove the final oils from the seeds. The oils are already rancid. They're steam cleaned. That removes all the vitamins and antioxidants, but the pesticides and solvents are still there. Then they're mixed with finely grated nickel powder, and they're put in a room as big as this barn with, can you imagine, filled with vegetable oil and powdered nickel, and then the hydrogen at high temperature is bubbled through. And what goes into that reactor is this liquid. What comes out is a semi-solid that looks like gray cottage cheese, and it stinks to high heaven. Then they steam clean it to remove the odor. They use emulsifiers to get the lumps out, and then they remove the gray color by bleaching. So at that point, you have what's called pure vegetable shortening. That's Crisco, okay, which we were all told to use because lard was bad for us, because lard had cholesterol in it, or saturated fat. So that's Crisco. That's what they use for French fries in the fast food places and so forth. To make margarine, they add artificial flavors, synthetic vitamins. They are not allowed to add an artificial color. They have to add a natural color to margarine. Now, isn't that comforting? Then it's packaged in blocks and tubs and promoted as a health food. And because this stuff is so cheap to make, they've had billions of dollars to advertise it, to influence the medical profession, and to get people to eat this garbage. And so what happens is you create trans fats, you move one of the hydrogens over to the other side, that straightens out the molecule so it behaves chemically like a saturated fat, but biochemically it doesn't work. And with the liquid oils you get uncontrolled reactions, chemical reactions. With the trans fats, you get inhibited chemical reactions. The enzymes don't work, receptors don't work, hormone production doesn't work. Just kind of stops things. So just as a summary, liquid polyunsaturated oils cause uncontrolled reactions in the body. The partially hydrogen oils inhibited reactions in the body. So the result is biochemical chaos. The number one thing you can do to improve your diet is to get rid of these industrial seed oils and use animal fats instead. And many, many diseases caused by these trans fats. Cancer, degeneration of the joints and tendons is why so many people need hip replacements today. Skin problems, they lower testosterone, they lower sperm count, and they're very bad for growing babies. Finally, the government came out and said that trans fats are bad. We're going to get rid of them in the food supply, which they've mostly done. But what they did was they used this whole business of trans fats to blast the saturated fats. So they came out and said, trans fats are bad. Gosh, they're just as bad as saturated fats. See? But the thing is, the saturated fats have the opposite reactions, opposite effects compared to the trans fats. They're good. For example, saturated fats help the insulin receptors on our cells, but they inhibit, the trans fats inhibit insulin receptors. Saturated fats enhance the immune system. Trans fats depress the immune system. So just remember our rule. The government says saturated fats are bad, right? What does that mean? That they're good. So a few interesting studies. We give low-fat milk to our children in schools, and that's supposed to keep them from getting fat. But we have 2 studies showing that children on low-fat diets or skim milk diets had greater weight gain, and they ended up eating more sugar. Women drinking low-fat milk had fertility problems. When they put them on full-fat milk, they were able to get pregnant. And then the guy running the study said, well, it was very embarrassing to the powers that be, this study. They said, well, once you get pregnant, you can go back to drinking skim milk again. Don't you think that the foods you need to get pregnant are the foods you need to grow a healthy baby? But my favorite study of all the literature, is this one from Sweden. Women using cheese and full-fat dairy had lower weight gain as they grew older. It didn't say no weight gain, lower weight gain, okay? It is normal and healthy, natural, desirable for women to gain weight when they go through menopause. That weight, that extra fat is not bad for you. It actually takes over from the ovaries and produces estrogen and also stem cells. And if you are 50 years old and you can still wear your prom dress, you're too thin, okay? You're supposed to gain about 2 dress sizes when you come to menopause. That's healthy, that's normal, that's natural. You don't want to gain any more, of course. And that's why you do the full fat. My favorite study. Anyway, the big campaign against trans fats, and they compared them to the saturated fats. It's kind of disgusting. And this is from the World Heart Federation. They're comparing butter to razor blades. I was asked to give a talk at the Chatham House in London, which is kind of this think tank thing. And there was a guy there from the World Heart Federation, and I gave my talk about how we need to eat butter and have plenty of salt in our diet. I thought he was going to have a heart attack right there. And here, comparing saturated fat to a mousetrap. Yeah. I mean, this is relentless propaganda against natural foods. What we see in the supermarkets today is the healthy spreads, right? Because they can make these without trans fats, but they are full of bad oils anyway, and plus a lot of fillers and emulsifiers and so forth. So most people don't eat margarine anymore. They eat the healthy spreads. So these are the bad fats, the margarines and spreads, the salad dressings, the oils, the cooking oils, and all the things made with them, the artificial whipped cream, mayonnaise and Crisco and that kind of thing. This is what you want to get out of your diet. And they're in all the foods, you know, the processed foods, they're in the snack foods, and they're in the fast food. French fries used to be made in tallow, which is very healthy, but now they're made with vegetable oils. So they're cancer sticks. And the salad dressing. The first thing you can do is make your own salad dressing. These are such garbage. Read the labels on these things. They're the cheapest oils and lists of additives. Lots of MSG in these also. So here are your 6 basic good fats and oils for your kitchen. Butter, that goes on your vegetables, it goes on your toast. You know, put it on everything. I cook in lard, especially pastured lard. The olive oil is for making your own salad dressing. I do cook in duck fat also because it's a great source of vitamin K2. Coconut oil is a healthy fat. You can use it for lots of things. And then the cod liver oil is for you're not going to cook with cod liver oil, believe me. That's for your A and D. Please don't be afraid of butter. It is nature's most perfect fat. It is the fat in nature for the growth and development of all mammals. There can't be anything wrong with it. Not only do we have our fat-soluble vitamins, but we have minerals and all kinds of special fats. One that I want to talk about is arachidonic acid. This is a type of long-chain fat that it's an omega-6 fatty acid. It is only found in animal fats and organ meats. We need arachidonic acid for healthy skin, good digestion. But the key thing about arachidonic acid is that we make endocannabinoids out of arachidonic acid. That's what we need to make our own natural marijuana in the body. We cannot do it without animal fats. I like to say that the natural state of the human being is to feel high all the time. And that only happens if you're eating animal fats. Because you can't make these things without arachidonic acid. So all these addictions that we're seeing today, we must be very sympathetic to this. Because what these people are trying to do is feel the way beings are supposed to feel, which is naturally happy, mellow, positive outlook. And that only it's going to happen naturally if you're eating animal fats. So I ask, is the epidemic of mental illness today the tragic result of the campaign against animal fats? And I believe it is. It's absolutely tragic. So what are the consequences of using soybean oil instead of animal fats? And 80% of all oil used in processed food is soybean oil. Mental health problems, hormonal disruption, cancer and heart disease, learning disorders. And these problems get worse with each generation. One more thing about soybean oil. A tablespoon of soybean oil contains as much estrogen as one birth control pill. Just a tablespoon of soybean oil. Okay, that's a serving of French fries. That's a serving of chicken nuggets, or might be 2 tablespoons in a serving of chicken nuggets. Okay, Eighth principle. I gotta hurry here. You saw the omega-6 and the omega-3 polyunsaturated fats. We need a balance of these. What's happened in our diets is that we're getting way too much omega-6 and a little bit of omega-3. And I'm sure you've probably heard of this. I think this is the one thing that was in my book, Nourishing Traditions. It's kind of gotten out there into the general public. In the primitive diet, you had a nice balance between omega-6 and omega-3. In the modern diet, you have way too much omega-6, and that's because these vegetable oils are almost pure omega-6. Whoops, sorry. When we raise our animals outside, for example, free-range eggs, you're going to get a nice balance. When they're in confinement, you get way too much omega-6. So this one is very easy to fix. First of all, you just get rid of all those vegetable oils. You might want to add a little bit of flax oil to your salad dressing, and I mean a small amount, maybe half a teaspoon to a salad dressing for 4 people. Flax oil is a great source of omega-3. And then choose organic and pasture-fed animal and plant foods for a good source of omega-3 fatty acids. So you want to have a balance. And a good way of thinking of this is balance the foods of land and sea. So your omega-6, you get arachidonic acid, and that comes from animal fats. The omega-3 comes from cod liver oil and seafood. Ninth principle, all traditional diets contain salt. Either sea salt or from salt flats and mine salt. By the way, in the North American continent, there was a salt trade throughout the continent. There were salt trails, and they mostly got the salt from salt springs in the Ohio Valley or from the Rocky Mountains. There was sources of salt. In some places where they didn't have salt, they burnt sodium-rich marsh grasses and added that to their food. Milk and meat products have some salt in them, and in some areas that drank the blood or the urine of their animals to get salt. So why do we need salt? Well, we need the sodium in salt to activate enzymes for digesting carbohydrates. We need the chloride part of salt to make hydrochloric acid to digest meat. If you're not eating a lot of salt, you're going to find meat very hard to digest. So we need salt for digestion. So we've got a salt taste in our mouth. Did the Creator put that salt taste in there to torture us? No, He put it there, or she put it there, so we would salt our food, to put salt on our food, because without the salt, we cannot digest our food. We need salt for the development of the brain, to make glial cells in the brain. One of the worst things we do is tell mothers not to give babies their salt. They absolutely need salt. We need salt for adrenal function, hormone production, and it's the basis of cellular metabolism. Unfortunately, we figured out how to ruin our salt, just like we figured out how to ruin everything else. And we refine our salt and take out all the trace minerals, and then we add an aluminum-based additive that makes it pour when it rains and keeps it from sticking. So our salt should be gray, beige, or pink, not white, indicating the presence of minerals. How much salt do we need? The adult requirement for salt is 1.5 teaspoons per day. And that is actually the current consumption. One of the ways that we're so fortunate compared to traditional cultures is we have a guaranteed source of inexpensive salt. This was the way that autocrats and dictators controlled people in the past, by controlling the salt. The salt consumption in 1900 was actually double that, 3 teaspoons per day, because we salted all our meat. And the meat and the fish and everything was very salty. The government wants us to cut our salt consumptions to 3 grams a day, 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt per day. And the way they're doing that is with this new flavor called Cinnamix. How many of you have heard of Cinnamix? It's in every processed food, and it's not labeled. It comes under artificial flavors. And nobody's done any studies on what this does to any of us. Okay. 10th principle, traditional cultures made use of the bones, usually as a nourishing bone broth, like the beautiful chicken broth we had this morning. The bone broth has many roles to play. It supplies minerals in a form easy to assimilate. The main role is to provide collagen. Bone broth is basically melted collagen. Helps us build healthy cartilage. The amino acids in bone broth help us detoxify. The gelatin helps digestion. Bone broth is very healing to the digestive tract, so anyone having digestive problems. And finally, the glycine in broth regulates dopamine for mental and emotional health. And you want your dopamine to be kind of in the middle. If your dopamine's too high, you're very excitable and you're hyperactive. If your dopamine's too low, you can't get going in the morning. So the glycine in broth regulates dopamine levels. So learn to make broth. The easiest broth to make is chicken broth. We always add a little vinegar. It helps bring the minerals out into the water. Always skim as it comes to a simmer. There's lots of recipes in my book and in Nourishing Broth. Good broth resurrects the dead is a South American proverb. Ooh, chicken heads. My daughter took this photograph in the Himalayas when she was trekking in the Himalayas. And what were they buying these chicken heads for? They were buying them to make chicken soup because there's a lot of cartilage in the chicken heads and the chicken feet. So we really encourage you to buy the heads and feet, and if you're in one of these, buying directly from a farm, you can get the heads and feet. Beef. This is beef broth, which we're reducing to make a flavorful, thick sauce. This is the basis of gourmet sauces in European cuisine, and when you put these beautiful sauces on your meat, it's like you're eating the whole animal. You're getting the meat proteins and you're getting the collagen proteins. And there's actually more collagen in our bodies than muscle. So we want to make sure that we're nourishing that collagen by the bone broth. There's your book. I wrote a book on the subject. Okay. What the industry has figured out is how to make this flavor of broth using artificial flavors, mainly MSG. So here's some, MSG is pretty much in any processed food. It's been linked to diabetes, migraines and headaches, obesity. There is really good research showing that MSG causes obesity. Really good. And children are starting to, getting it from the processed foods they eat from a very young age. And then autism, ADHD, and Alzheimer's. The MSG is toxic to the brain. It's particularly toxic to the hypothalamus, which is where we make feel-good chemicals, where we make where we have impulse control, and where we make chemicals for satiety, keep us from gaining weight. And it's not labeled. Usually it's labeled, it's in hydrolyzed, anything hydrolyzed, the caseinates, textured vegetable protein. It's not labeled. And I strongly recommend this book, Excitotoxins, by Russell Blaylock, who describes what happens to our nerve cells when they are exposed to MSG. They get super excited, okay? And then they disintegrate. So, anyone here ever get tired? Yeah. So the solution to fatigue is to make your foods easily digestible. So that means raw dairy, not pasteurized. Much more easy to digest. Proper preparation of grains, you're pre-digesting your grains. Lacto-fermented foods, rich in enzymes and beneficial bacteria. And the gelatin-rich bone broth. The less energy required for digestion, the more energy that you're going to have. Final principle, traditional cultures made provisions for future generations. They fed special foods for parents-to-be, pregnant women, nursing women, and growing children. Also, they practiced the spacing of children. It was considered shameful in many cultures to have a child more than once in 3 years. And this allows the mother to recover her nutritional stores so that every child born to that mother has an equal chance in life. And this, again, is totally supported by the science. Science has shown that to reduce birth defects, you want to space at least once every 3 years. And finally, they taught the principles of proper diet to the young. Our young people are being taught through advertising. We are not teaching proper principles to the young. As I said, the heart starts to form. This says 6 days old. I said 7 days old, but very early the heart starts to form. And you need to be built up in vitamin A for that heart to form properly. So we recommend the preconceptual diet at least 6 months before conception, and for those who've been vegetarians or eaten the standard American diet, we recommend 1 to 2 years to prepare. This woman from Fiji has walked many miles to obtain a sacred food for the baby growing in her womb. It's a special type of crab. She will eat the whole crab, not just the meat. She will eat the yellow part in there, which is where all the fat-soluble vitamins are, and she'll grind up the shell and add it to her other food. Go back to our American Beauty. Her sister is a lovely girl, but a little bit of narrowing of the face. And she was, there was only 15 months between them. So the mother did not have enough time to recover her nutritional stores. And this is the pattern that we saw 50 years ago. Today we're seeing the very narrow face even in the first child. These are 2 modern children, good facial structure. They were not locked in a closet. They did have a little junk food every now and then growing up, but they were fed the right kinds of foods at home. They got their cod liver oil, and they were spaced 3 years apart. There's a beautiful Weston A. Price baby. That is the goal of all of us. If we're having children, we prepare for the children. If we're aunts and uncles and grandparents, we support our young families in any way that we can. Maybe as a grandmother, you go pick up the raw milk every week. We call them raw milk grannies. So. This is what's being recommended, what I call the puritanical diet: virtuous, plant-based, low-fat, low-salt, high-fiber, impossible to stay on, approved by dietitians, recommended by the government. Here's another type of puritanical diet, the paleo diet: lean meat and dry vegetables, okay? You cannot stay on these diets. And what they do is force you into the pornographic foods. What's wrong with, and by the way, you don't have to eat kale, okay? Kale is very hard to digest, full of oxalic acid. It's going to cause kidney stones. If you want to eat a little kale, make sure it's really cooked well and not in a raw juice or a chip. What's wrong with the foods we used to eat? Beautiful chicken with crispy skin, and beef with all the fat, and vegetables with butter, and soup with cream. What's wrong with these wonderful old-fashioned foods? This is where we need to go, back to where we were, and include the superfoods: cod liver oil, liver, raw milk, etc. We like to say that there's no deprivation on the Wise Traditions diet. You can have it all. Meat, sauces and gravy, bacon, eggs, seafood. You can have all the butter you want on our diet. Right kind of salt, properly prepared grains, raw milk and cheese. You can have lacto-fermented pickles, vegetable soups. You can have sweets in moderation, and you can have soft drinks in moderation, especially our lacto-fermented soft drinks. Only our lacto-fermented. Okay, so we set up the Weston A. Price Foundation to provide this information in as many forms as possible. We hope if you're not a member already, you'll become a member today. We have $10 off on membership today. Please pick up some of our educational flyers on the table. We have a huge website. It can be a little overwhelming, but if you're looking for, let's just say you're suffering from gout. Put gout in our search engine. You'd be very interested in what you come up with. A number of articles on blood pressure, a number of articles on cancer. So it's a very thorough, complete website that we're constantly adding to. We have a shopping guide which names brand names, which we update every year, and it's also available as an app. Our wonderful Healthy for Life dietary guidelines. These are alternate to the government guidelines. And our latest booklet, which we're very proud of, is our 11 Wise Traditions Principles, beautifully illustrated. We have special issues on babies and heart disease. We have our very popular podcast, which we're up to 1 million downloads in our podcast. $10 million. Thank you. 10 million. Yes, okay. And then I do have my books on the back table, Baby and Child Care. I have a cookbook for children and my 3 other books I did. And The Contagion Myth, which is our subject for this afternoon. Dr. Price's pioneering work, strongly recommend you read it. So, final slide here. Everything they did in traditional diets maximize the nutrients in the food, whether it was the choices of food or the way they grew them or the way they prepared them. It was the maximization of nutrients. Everything we do in modern diets depletes nutrients and minimizes what's in the food. Also adds a lot of toxins to our food. Diet, to me, is 80% of any recovery. It might not be 100%, but we have all kinds of other modalities that help you recover, everything from homeopathy to herbs, even to allopathic medicine. They all have their place, but the diet comes first. And without the good diet, the nutrient-dense diet, a lot of these other modalities are pretty much wasted. We have a 50% pledge. We ask everyone to take the pledge to spend 50% of your food dollars and direct purchases from local farmers and artisans. And with the remainder of your food dollars, you can celebrate how small the world has become and enjoy pineapple and rice and papaya and so forth. So the world is, everything's local today. The key thing is nutrient density, supporting our small farms who are doing things right. It's not going to change from the top. It will only change from the grassroots, and emphasis on grass. And these PowerPoint presentations are available on my website, nourishingtraditions.com, under resources. But this particular presentation will be on our website, and we ask all of you to get the word out and help share it with others. So thank you very much. You've been a great audience.